Good morning, Exiles. How's it going, everybody? I have been taking it really slow with the PoE 2 season, but yesterday, or the day before yesterday, there were some leaks of the Ascendancies. I've been holding off, trying to sit there and pour over every little bit of information that's come out. And because of the leaks, GGG was unfortunately forced, basically, to release all of the Ascendancy information. And boy, am I glad that they did. So yesterday on stream, we spent over 4 hours pouring over every single Ascendancy, and it's just got me excited. I can't help it. I want to share my thoughts and current plans around the Ascendancies, what I want to do going into Path of Exile 2 on Friday. Super excited about it. I've been trying to keep the hype as low as possible, and after looking at the Ascendancies, I am more excited than ever. But it's all not sunshine and roses. There's a couple things that I'm not super happy about. It has changed my plans. Because Ascendancies cannot be respect, you can change the nodes within the Ascendancy, I assume, just like in Path of Exile 1, but you cannot change which Ascendancy you choose. And because of this, that is a very large investment of your time, with the campaign taking up to 50 hours for some newer players. You want to be very careful about your choice going into what your Ascendancy pick is, what you go for there. Because if you spend those 50 hours doing it and then you end up with one that just doesn't fit your play style, maybe we can't figure out a really good build for that Ascendancy early on because we're just learning a brand new game. You want to be careful about that. And so what I'm going to share with you guys today is a very quick rundown of my thoughts on the Ascendancies. I'm going to point out nodes that look notable, look particularly good, ones that look kind of questionable, and which Ascendancies I think are going to be the best for beginners, best for intermediate, advanced players, ideas around builds that you can make with them. It's all going to be, rough. We don't know uniques. We don't know all of the skills. So, it's all with a grain of salt, but I want to share my knowledge on that because I think, like I said before, that time investment is very important to get right for your choice there on your Ascendancy. So yeah, let's get right into it. All right. So as we're going along this, we're going to show the Ascendancy. I'm going to talk about my thoughts on it, and then we're going to put it in a tier list that's kind of a mishmash of my thoughts on the overall design, the way it fits, the strength of Path of Exile in general. Again, this is all coming from a PoE 1 bias as well, so just take it all with a grain of salt. This is just instinct going into PoE 2. But having played PoE 2, there's obviously a lot of overlap, so PoE 1 knowledge will apply a good amount going into PoE 2. We just have to, change our ideas of some systems here. Also, just to make it very clear for newer players, welcome everyone that's new to Path of Exile 2. And Ascendancy is kind of your super class that you pick. That's your specialty after you pick your base class. So for example, you can pick a sorcerer, and you start the sorcerer, you get your casting spells, you get a fireball, you get a frostbolt, stuff like that. And then throughout the campaign, there will be these trials that you can do that you can ascend. You choose an ascension that will be your specialization, basically. So you can turn into a Stormweaver or a Chronomancer. So it's like, hey, I want to do time magic, or I want to turn into someone who's good at cold and lightning. So that's the basic idea. Also going into this, just if you're coming from a game that's more rigid in its classes, Path of Exile, it's really about an archetype or an idea for how you can take advantage of those nodes to make any type of build. So you can play something called a Stormweaver, and you can use a crossbow that happens to do cold damage, because you just have generic nodes that say, hey, you do more cold damage, but there's nothing stopping you from using a crossbow with that. Now, if it says spells specifically, it does kind of pigeonhole you in a little bit, but there's a lot of generic application here. For example, the Deadeye, right here, she has a bow and arrow. She has hey, skills have +1 proj. Well, what's a skill? Fireball. So that was a very common thing in Path of Exile 1, is you could play a Deadeye with a spell that shot projectiles, and you could actually just get more and stronger projectiles on a bow, quote-unquote bow character. So that's just the thing to go into Path of Exile understanding, is there's incredible flexibility, and we're going to see a lot of that with these Ascendancies. So anyway, let's get started. All right, we're going to start off with the Stormweaver here, which is a cold and lightning themed Ascendancy for the Sorceress. And I think it's going to be one of the most popular Ascendancies going into PoE 2. What does the Stormweaver do? She is built around cold and lightning. She can get more chill, more shock. You can apply Elemental Storm, which I believe is going to be for non-crit builds because the Storm itself can't crit. I think it's like similar to Elemental Overload if you come from Path of Exile 1. I actually think her strongest nodes are probably Arcane Surge with Force of Will. You can make your Arcane Surge, it gives you more cast speed and mana regen rate, and then the more you stack mana, the stronger that Arcane Surge gets. And then we don't know how good Recoup is going to actually end up feeling. I am concerned about physical damage mitigation in basically every Ascendancy except for Invoker, which we'll get to later. Physical damage mitigation in PoE 1 was critical for having an actual tanky feeling character, and we don't see that in very many classes right now. So I think Heart of the Storm potentially is really good, particularly if we have physical taken as elemental conversion, just like in PoE 1. But I think Stormweaver just has really good generic ailment scaling. I think Arcane Surge is really, really good. And I think Stormweaver is a great Ascendancy. Hopefully I can remember what I did last night in the tier list, but I am putting Stormweaver at S tier. I think she is actually, I think I had her at top of A, but I do think she is very, very good. Arguably S or A tier. She's incredibly strong, just generically good. I think she's very beginner friendly. All you have to do is pick cold and lightning skills, and you don't even need very much crit. Elemental Storm is really nice. And then if you do start stacking your mana, you have just great quality of life, cast speed, mana regen, and it's going to feel really good. I think she's a great Ascendancy. So that is the Stormweaver there. Next up is a Chronomancer, something that I'm not going to be able to hide my disappointment about. If you've been in the streams, you know that I've been very, very excited about the Chronomancer. In my gaming life, in RPGs, I always want to play the caster that does time and space manipulation. It's one of my favorite, power fantasies in RPGs. And the way that this character is implemented does not really fit. It actually has two of my least favorite things that they have ever put in Path of Exile RPGs. I'm not going to mince words here. I'm just going to give you guys my raw opinion on this. So what is the Chronomancer? How do I think she's intended to be played? So Chronomancer has some really cool tools that seem really interesting, but I think in practice, outside of very specific situations, she's going to be kind of awkward. What she has is 3 different active skills right here. So what we have here is number 2, 3, and 4. So if we look where we start up here. 2 is down here, 3 is down here, and 4 is right here. So if you don't want to use her active skills, you can just avoid this entire corner. But then I think you're not even really playing anything that's very useful. She has Time Snap, which says it resets the cooldown of all of your skills, including, we assume, Time Freeze and Temporal Rift. So the entire character is built around freezing the entire screen. So we have something called Time Freeze. And these are cooldown skills. So you can freeze the screen. It's 8 meters, I think, by default, which is basically the whole screen. And then also Temporal Rift, where you can rewind in time. This is a skill in PoE 1 that we actually didn't use in PoE 1 very much because it was very niche. Because PoE 2 is a slower game, because I think recovery is going to be slower as well. You're going to have more time, and just damage from the monsters is going to be lower, versus the speed of the game. That we're going to have time to react, press Temporal Rift. It'll rewind you in time. Think Echo in League of Legends or Tracer in Overwatch. It'll rewind you, reset your life mana in Energy Shield to where it was, and then you can keep going. And these are cooldown-based skills. And then we have Time Snap right here, so you can freeze the monsters, do your damage, and then when it undoes, you can, when they unfreeze, you can press Time Snap again, reset your Time Freeze, do it all over again. So you get these, a double rotation here of Time Freeze. And then in addition to that, you get Now and Again right here, which gives you a 33% chance to not consume a cooldown when used. So what that means is you can, for example, Time Freeze. Oh, it didn't use the cooldown. I don't have to use my Time Snap. I can just use Time Freeze again. So you're basically fishing for these, or not even fishing, you're playing around these procs that sometimes they trigger, sometimes they don't. And in my experience in Path of Exile, I really prefer a consistent, my experience in all games, is I really prefer a consistent feel to my character. I don't like fishing for procs and like really having to pay attention to cooldowns that are conditional based on just a random number generator. Because, hey, I'm going into this encounter, I have my plan around my positioning, how I want to use my cooldowns, and then reacting based on these certain procs, I find it very, very awkward feeling. If you do hit those procs, it can be very powerful. I think there will be some very flashy plays that people can make, particularly the fact that you can freeze and slow down bosses. That can really lead to some montages that people could probably do, where you're freezing, you're using Temporal Rift and rewinding things, really dodging all of the boss mechanics. But for example, if you're playing just mapping, right? In my experience in PoE 1, who knows what this is like in PoE 2, but in PoE 1, you really want a consistent feel going from pack to pack, because sometimes with this pack will be harder, sometimes this one won't be. And if there's a random number generator that is stacking, how hard that pack is going to feel versus your consistent expected feel, I think it's going to feel really, really awkward on average, particularly, based on how your cooldown recovery rate is and all that. My instinct here, like what I wanted from the class was like slow time bubbles, being able to, teleport behind a monster and do some, I don't know, like rip out their soul in time or something and make them take a damage over time based on, some sort of accelerated time or something, or slowed down time, like really, really cool time manipulation, time and space manipulation. And instead we just get this like weird cooldown fishing. So that's the first thing that I don't like. Like I said, I think there will be some really impressively powerful plays that you can make with it, but I think it's going to feel awkward and uncomfortable to play. In my opinion, I actually think that this is my vote for the number one class that's going to get reworked or thought of again the soonest. Because I think it's just too awkward, and I think in practice it's going to, again, with PoE1 bias, I think that this is going to just feel really uncomfortable to play. There's also just no generic power on this class. Next up, my second, actually probably my least favorite thing that they've ever done in Path of Exile 1 for a class power. And these are called pendulum skills, named after, it was called Hourglass, or Pendulum of Destruction was the name of it in Path of Exile 1. It was an old elementalist skill that gave you damage, or I forget it was just generic damage, or also the ability, there's like confluxes that will allow you to inflict ailments and all that based on a timer. So every 12 seconds, so for example, I'll show you guys right now, the least picked node on the most popular class in all of Path of Exile 1 right now is a pendulum node. So we have this node right here called Heartstopper. Every 10 seconds, and like this node is on average mathematically incredibly powerful. Trickster is easily the most powerful class right now, just on average most powerful class in PoE1. And Heartstopper mathematically is amazing. Like every 5 seconds, you're either taking 40% less damage from hits or damage over time. The thing is, you want that consistency for the type of damage you're taking at the time. I would rather take 10% less damage from hits and damage over time all the time, instead of this random 40 less from either hits or damage over time. The inconsistency of these pendulum mechanics can feel, and just like the way that the game works, again, PoE1 is just so much faster. You can fish for these things, right? So anyway, Quicksand Hourglass, every 12 seconds, gain 50% more cast speed for 4 seconds. So when that procs, you're going to feel awesome. Like the idea here is you're going to fish for like, I get the double time freeze, and I want to line that up with my Quicksand Hourglass. But the bosses or the monsters might not cooperate with that. Or you go in between packs of monsters and like, oh, this pack of monsters is easy. I don't know if the next pack of monsters is going to be hard. So you're going to be encouraged, like, oh, I walk up to, okay, I see a hard monster in the distance. What do? I know my Quicksand Hourglass has 8 more seconds until it procs. Okay, so I'm going to sit here for 8 seconds waiting for Quicksand Hourglass, then I walk up to the pack of monsters. Or I walk up to a pack of monsters and it's a trivial monster that I can kill in 1 or 2 casts, then it's totally wasted. If anything, this is going to translate to you actually slowing down how you play. If you want to get the most efficiency out of this, you're going to slow down how you play to play around the Quicksand Hourglass. I would rather take 10% more cast speed all the time than 50% more 1/3 of the time. And, let's look at the Stormweaver. Look at this. 10% more cast speed all of the time. And if you're stacking some mana, this can easily get up to 20, 30, 40, 40 is probably high, but easily 20 to 30% more cast speed 100% of the time. Compare these two nodes. This 10% all the time, godlike. 50% more time, 1/3 of the time, get them out of here. I'm not even interested. Like, compare those nodes 1 to 1. It's just, sorry. I am just so disappointed in this class. We'll get it out of the way. Trust me, there's really good ones coming. All right. All the other ones will be faster. I just had to rant about this because this class really bothers me. It's just makes me sad. Anyway, EA, hopefully they rework it. Enemies in your presence are slowed by 20%. This is very, very good. I think, in my opinion, this is easily her strongest node. The time freeze and all that's probably just amazing, but slowing all enemies by 20% all the time. Presence, I think, is also 8 meters. That's the whole entire screen. So everything on the screen will be slowed by 20%. Then you can stack chills in addition to that, and you can really slow down monsters. Probably similar to Stormweaver, but Stormweaver can just do it by hitting them. You know, it's like, again, if we compare these 1-to-1, if you have heavy snows, you can actually just have them even slower and more chilled than with a chill and the enemies in your presence are slowed, right? Granted, you don't have to hit them for a certain amount, and whatever. But anyway, next up, 30% damage recouped as life. That's nice. This will actually just give you a bigger buffer, a little bit more time to recover before you have to worry about, using your Temporal Rift or anything like that. I would much rather see a node that we see in another class on her. I'd rather slow the damage that I'm taking, similar to Progenesis in PoE 1, and we actually see this on a monk class. I think it's on a monk class later on. Recoup, to me, is actually the opposite of what I would want on Chronomancer. I want her to slow the damage she's taking because she has control over time instead of getting that damage back. So Recoup, I don't know what the default is. I think it's 8 or 10 seconds in PoE 2. It's actually default 4 seconds in PoE 1. You have to invest 7 and 8 right here. So you have to put all 4 points in here, 4 of your 8 points, just to make your Recoup work over 4 seconds. It gives you a longer buffer. But I actually think Recoup, like I said, Recoup actually is an anti-synergy with Temporal Rift, because what it's going to do is you're going to be getting your life back, and then you use Temporal Rift, and there's a chance that you could actually rewind yourself in time to right when you took that damage, instead of like, I think this is, I'm sorry, I think Chronomancer is just like designed very poorly. Okay, anyway, I can't control myself on this one. Chronomancer, I am putting her in, I'm putting Chronomancer in the bottom of C tier. I would put her in F tier. I'm putting her in F tier. I actually really just don't like her. I'm incredibly disappointed with her. I think that there is some really cool potential, like I said, with like outplays where you proc things, you line up your faster cast speed at the right time. Really cool things can happen. But you're just looking at her nodes, comparing. I already know the nodes on the other Ascendancies. The other ones are just better. Just like 1-to-1, they're basically just better on average, no matter what. So I do not like this class. I hope they take another look at her. Let's see. I'm also rating these. I rated Stormweaver 8 out of 10 and beginner friendly. I put Chronomancer 3 out of 10 and for advanced players, because paying attention to all of those cooldowns, playing it properly, is going to be one of the harder ones to play properly. There's no really good generic offense or defensive nodes on her besides freezing the whole screen. For all I know, freezing the whole screen and playing around that is so powerful that she doesn't need anything else, and that's entirely possible. But my instinct from what I'm looking at here is she's really bad. Anyway, the other ones will be faster, don't worry. And so we're going to go for a straight about face right here and start looking at something crazy. Where is he? I think if you want to bonk, and you want to bonk hard, and you just want something that is very generically good, I think Titan, we're not even going to mince words right here. Titan right here, I'm putting him in S tier. I think everything that he has is just strong, good, fun, good quality of life, and you're going to be happy with him. So this guy is the big bonking. He is the warrior upgrade, one of the warrior ascendancies. And let's go over it. 50% more armor from equipped body armor. I think this is just really good quality of life early on. If you're stacking armor, so coming from PoE 1, there are ways to get more damage, even more defense by, stacking a lot of armor as much as possible, and getting more armor. Just, this is physical damage mitigation. Like I said earlier, physical damage in PoE 1 is, I think, easily the scariest damage type. It's the hardest to mitigate. The way that armor works in PoE 1, and I assume PoE 2, is armor kind of has a, I think it has a logarithmic fall off on how it scales versus the size of the hit. So you actually need significantly more armor to deal with bigger and bigger hits. So if you look at the amount that's mitigated right here, I've shown this graph so many times. If you have 1,000 damage incoming and you want to mitigate roughly half of that, you need 5,000 armor. But for a 2,000 damage hit to mitigate half that, you need 10,000 armor. So going from 1,000 to 2,000 incoming hit damage, you need to double your armor. It gets harder and harder to stack that armor as much. And hits get very, very big later on from bosses. So, your percentage mitigation for a lot of little hits, armor's incredible for a lot of little hits. You're going to be taking almost no damage if you have good armor. If your armor is your primary damage mitigation for physical damage, you do need a ton of it. And that's why stacking a lot of it is, if that is your primary mitigation right there, it's huge. So I think great quality life on Stone Skin. I do think it's a node that it's not going to be the most picked, but I do think it's really good. Next up, Earthbreaker and Ancestral Empowerment. So it just makes your slam skills do damage again. Every other one will be boosted. It gets more damage. It gets more area effect Just really, really nice. Colossal Capacity right here. This was a thing that we had in Path of Exile 1, where your inventory actually gets bigger. You basically get a backpack, more inventory slots, depending on how we play PoE 2. In PoE 1, we picked up a ton of items every single map. You would fill your entire inventory. Sometimes you would fill it, go back to your hideout, fill up your stash, go back in, pick up more stuff, and you'd use all 6 portals just to fill up your stash. So much loot would drop, and we loved having more inventory slots. So a lot of people are saying, oh, that's a waste, but inventory slots, at least in PoE 1, were so valuable. It's just really good quality of life, and you can put all of your consumables over there. You know, you got crafting materials, you got your wisdom scrolls, all that stuff. You put them in their own little bucket on the side, and it just makes your inventory very clean. You cannot overstate how nice the quality of life is here. Next up, Hulking Form. I think that this is one of the strongest nodes in the entire tree, for every single ascendancy. 50% increased effective small passive skills. So I believe it's confirmed that they don't work on the small passives on your ascendancy, but for your passive tree, I don't have the PoE2 tree open right now, but on your passive tree, every single small node that you take, including the ones going up to the notables right here. So for example, if we take a look at like a small cluster that is really strong, like this is a really good strong cluster right here, right? Sovereignty, mana reservation. So think of this as like spirit reservation in PoE 2. This allows you to reserve more auras. This is a type of attribute that is very, very hard to get. And there will be similar things in PoE 2 that are just hard to get. There are certain clusters that are very valuable, and getting more power out of them is just so strong because they're so hard to get, to the point where we often anoint additional nodes that just give us more mana reservation. So very often people will take sovereignty, they're going to take influence, and they're also going to anoint on their amulet charisma, and you can anoint in PoE 2 as well. And it's just that valuable to stack more auras. And if I had the hulking form, these leading nodes, right? See, the big node here is 12%, but these 2 leading nodes are 8%. And so these getting 50% more, I would actually get an additional 8%. And that is really strong. And then the thing is, it's every single one of these small nodes. I assume also the attribute nodes along the way, all of these will stack 50% stronger. I think it's godlike. I think this is one of the strongest nodes on every single ascendancy. Absolutely incredible. 6 and 7 right here, crushing blows and more damage against heavy stun enemies. This just allows you to stun enemies more often, and then just 40% generic more damage when you heavy stun an enemy. This is just really good. It's a win more mechanic. If you're building around stun, which is a very core mechanic now in PoE 2, you want to stun your enemies a lot. You can stun the bosses very consistently. They have a stun meter that builds up, similar to freeze. And you heavy stun them, you do 40% more damage. You love that. And then last up, 15% more maximum life. I think this is a node that, if you're life stacking and not on the Blood Mage, maybe. I don't know. But I think it's good quality life early on. If you have 1,000 life and you get another 150 life, I think it'll just feel good. This was actually 20% before, and they did nerf it. They like hotfix nerfed it already. A good generic node to take. Everything on Titan, I think, is good. I think Colossal Capacity, like if you want to min-max, you do want to kind of skip that, but I think he is so generically good. You can't go wrong with him. I'm just putting him S tier. I think he's very beginner friendly. I have no additional notes. All right, everyone take a drink of water. This is... every time I want to make a quick video, there's just too much to talk about. Oh, man. Path of Exile. We love it. Sometimes it loves us back. So next up is the Warbringer, the other warrior ascendancy. So he can break armor, makes you do more damage, do more physical damage to enemies. Break armor below 0. I'm kind of interpreting this very similarly to just resistances. They take more physical damage, the way you can think about it. Next up, Jade Heritage. I don't know how good this is going to feel. I think it's potentially very strong, but it's a mechanical reaction thing. Like think of it similar to a Molten Shell that makes you stand still in Path of Exile 1, where you gain this Jade passively and you kind of build up stacks of the potential to eat some hits. So you can make yourself stand still and then encase yourself fully in Jade, and then the hits will come in, you can just mitigate them. So if you see see a bunch of telegraphed hits or something coming in, I'm assuming this is kind of just like a bossing mechanic type of thing, maybe some hard essence monsters, something like that. I don't know really the applications for this for mapping in general. Next up, Ancestral Spirits. Trigger Ancestral Spirits when you summon a totem. Summons a minion. The minion is tied to that totem. I don't know if the minion lives in the totem and attacks around it, or if it just, you got a totem and the minion kind of has a spirit that's attached and can fly around. I don't know what the spirit looks like, but I assume that it's going to be pretty powerful, that you can scale. 20% of damage from hits is taken from your nearest totem's life before you. This is just really nice. Anything that takes damage instead of you is really good quality of life. We can think of this as just, as long as you got a totem down, 20% less damage taken. And that flat damage taken, that makes your armor stronger, that makes everything stronger for your defensive characteristics. So really, really good. Renly's training, 40% base chance to block from equipped shield instead of the shield's value. This allows you to, like, no matter what your block chance is on your shield, you will have 40% instead from the shield. So you don't have to worry about fishing for block chance on your shield. You can use shields that have no block chance, but because you have a shield and you have Renly's training, you'll have 40%. Next up, coming off of that, going from 6 to 7, 35% less block chance. Feels kind of bad, but can block damage from all hits while shield is not raised. So PoE 2 will work differently than PoE 1 in that by default, this is what chat was telling me, by default, you cannot block area of effect attacks. They're actually unblockable, which is pretty interesting, actually. Maybe you can block them with your shield is raised. I don't know that. But what I was told is that you cannot block AoE by default in PoE 2, and this will allow you to block AoE even when your shield is not raised. You will have to stack a lot more block. 35% less block chance feels bad. You have to stack a lot of it. But being able to mitigate, in PoE 1, a lot of AoE will happen. You walk up to a pack of monsters, and they will throw literally 20, 30, 40 projectiles that all do AoE explosions. And being able to block a lot of those just right off the bat could feel really good. How good block is in PoE 2 and conditional block and holding up your shield and all that, I don't know how it works in practice. From the understanding PoE 1, I think this is pretty good. However, do I want to take that? Like, that's 2 nodes. Again, like, it's all about the opportunity cost. 2 nodes just to scale block. What else am I taking? I think his other nodes are so good that it's just, you might want it for your defense. And then next up, I think his most interesting nodes in PoE 1, anything that explodes monsters is really good. You can have corpses on the ground, explode those corpses. It chains to being able to blow up everything on the entire screen. Very, very powerful. Corpses in your presence explode when you Warcry, dealing 25% of their life as physical damage. That is a very large number. So 25% of their life, you think, well, that's not very much. But if you can 4x that to 100% of their life, very easily you can do that. Then that damage can guarantee kill the next monster. And if there's 2 corpses on the ground, then you're doing even more damage. So think, for example, you have a rare monster. Those are the harder monsters. They always come with minions. And so they're 10 little minions. You kill them with 1 attack. And you have 10 corpses on the ground. Those monsters will do 100% of their life. You Warcry, every single one, 100%. And presence is the entire screen as well. Remember that. Every single corpse on the entire screen will explode for your scale damage. And then one shot, probably the rare monster as well. That's in the middle of that pack of minions. And then next up, ignore Warcry cooldowns. You can spam it. Depends on what the cooldowns are. Like, if the Warcry cooldowns aren't very long or you can get cooldown recovery rate, you might want to skip that one. But I think there's a good world where you take both of these. My instinct is take 4, 5, 8, and 9. I think you're just dropping totems. Things die. You Warcry. Very easy quality life. Your minions are killing things. I think it'll be really good. I put Warbringer as an intermediate character. I think, there's some play. There's some mechanical play with him on, using the Warcries, using the Encased in Jade. But I think he's just really powerful in general. I'm going to put him high B tier. Could put him somewhere A tier, B tier. He's somewhere around there. But he is just solid and good. All right, next up, Deadeye. The least changed Ascendancy in Path of Exile. This is very, very close to PoE 1. Not the closest, but there's a lot of overlap. So Deadeye is intended to be the bow character. But again, I believe there isn't anything that explicitly says attacks. Yeah, so this is the thing, like I said earlier, to pay very close attention to. Now, Eagle Eyes, accuracy penalty, I think that's only attacks, but everything else here is not explicitly attacks. So first up, chance to gain maximum frenzy charges, and then 50% of the nodes will be doubled. So just 50% more on average. Benefit of your frenzy charges, whatever you get from consuming them. Charges work very differently in Path of Exile 2. I don't know what you get from consuming frenzy charges for all the skills. This is potentially really good. Anything that's building around frenzy charges. For example, Flicker Strike in PoE 1 needs a frenzy charge to keep attacking. It has a cooldown otherwise. This would actually be, besides the fact that all of these don't really work, well, not some of these, most of these don't work with Flicker Strike. Because she has frenzy charge things, my instinct from just, if I was taking PoE 1 Flicker Strike and brought it over here, I would actually want to play Flicker Strike on a Deadeye. Because we basically get, really, really strong frenzy charge stuff. Next up, no accuracy penalty at a distance. I have no idea what accuracy penalty at distance is. Like, I assume because it's an entire Ascendancy node, it's good. How good is it? I have no idea. We have to see what that looks and feels like. Next up, Point Blank or Far Shot. This is a very unique setup. So when you take 4, you pick either 4A or 4B is what I'm guessing. I don't know if there's a way you can take both. In PoE 1, you would sometimes even take both to kind of have this like sweet spot in the middle where you could do more damage for both because they had like overlapping ranges. Sometimes you would do that. But here, it's just you do more damage close up or you deal more damage far away. Pick one of those as you go through to 5, Endless Munitions, Skills, Fire, and Additional Projectile. So similar here, these only say projectile and skill hits. So just think with Deadeye, she's holding a bow, but you can do this with Fireball. Fireball does hits, it is a projectile. More fireballs, more damage on your fireballs, this will work. Next up, Additional Mark. Apparently marks are not counted as curses in PoE 2, so you can have a mark and a curse, and then with called shots, you can have 2 marks and a curse. I assume marks work differently in PoE 2, so I reserve judgment on that, but I'm guessing it's probably just decent. Gathering Winds and Windward, I think these are probably just really, really good. So my instinct, I think the generic thing that most people are going to pick is 4, 5, 7, 8. I think there's a world where you go 1, 2, 7, 8. There's even a 1, 2, 7, 8. Unlikely. Depends on how you're building it. Non-projectile based stuff might go 1, 2, 7, 8. Stuff like that. We'll see. The fact that 5 is behind 4, I think there's a world where you don't really want to take 4 very much and you would like 5. So if there's Forbidden Flame and Flesh, there might even be a world where you go, 1, 2, 7, 8 and grab 5. Anyway, 7 and 8. Tailwind on skill use. Use Tailwind when hit. When you're playing a ranger type character, you're evasion based, you don't want to get hit, you're shooting at a range. When you hit an enemy, you get a stacking buff that will give you a 1% movement speed, 3% skill speed, and 15% increased evasion. Tailwind in PoE 1 did not give you evasion rating. It wasn't a stacking buff, it just had a flat number. So this is actually even stronger than Tailwind in PoE 1, assuming you don't get hit. This stacks 10 times, 10% movement speed, 30% skill speed, and 150% increased evasion rating is really, really good. Totally refreshed when you get another stack, so you don't have to worry about going between packs and each stack independent. As long as you don't get hit, that's really, really good. And then stacking that with Windward, this is 30% less damage taken for that one hit. Then you lose all the Tailwind. So one hit, 30% less damage taken, and then you got to get it back. But if you're an evasion-based character, that's really strong. I think Deadeye is just, it's so close to PoE 1 that my instinct is like kind of boring, but I think it's generically just really strong. Has defense, has offense. You good to go fast. I think it'll feel really good. Like, I kind of almost want to play it, but I really want to play something that feels super different than PoE 1. So I'm not going to play Deadeye, but I think she's a very strong A tier. I put her 8 out of 10, and I think she is very beginner friendly as well. Pick a bow skill, grab Endless Munitions and Windward, grab those 4 nodes, and you're good to go. All right, next up, the Pathfinder, which I feel kind of weird about. Pathfinder, the idea, we call her a flask finder a lot of the time in PoE 1, because you often play around building flask stuff. In PoE 1, a lot of these things are exactly the same, if not a little bit better here. So she has poison-themed things and flask-themed things. More flask charges gained, you just have more flask charges. This will give you a very high uptime of your flasks when you're fighting. You can fight a boss, you're getting your flask charges back. You don't have to worry about it. You can basically just spam them. Enduring Elixirs, this is the exact same thing, actually better than a node called Master Surgeon in PoE 1. This is also one of the strongest nodes in PoE 1, and it's even better in PoE 2. Now, the way that PoE 2 works, it might actually just not work out to matter that much, and it might not be as strong. The way this works, you can press your life flask. It will not remove when it fills up. So by default, when you use a life flask, as soon as you reach max life, the flask turns off. And so if you lose life again, you have to press that life flask. With Enduring Elixirs here, it'll keep going. So if your life flask lasts 5 seconds, you're at 90% life, you press that, your life will reach max, and then you're still regenerating. It's still sitting there regenerating. So for the next 5 seconds, you don't have to press a flask. You'll just keep getting your life back as you take hits. However, the flask effects do not queue. What that means is you can't press it additional times to stack it. If you want to get the value out of Enduring Elixirs, if you want that always active, you're going to just have yourself on a mental timer. Every 5 seconds, you're pressing that flask button. You may be building around using your life for your mana. Like, that's a thing you can do in PoE. So you may be spending your life for mana. You want this always active if you're building around it. It is incredibly powerful. However, it's also really annoying to play around. So that's just a warning right there. Contagious Contamination, the most damaging poison on enemies you kill, is spread to other enemies within 1.5 meters. It gives you proliferation on your poison, allows you to poison one monster, and then it'll spread throughout the entire pack. Now, if you are building around additional poisons, PoE 2, poisons are by default only 1, but there are ways to stack even more. Apparently, you can get more poison on the tree. People were telling me between 10 and 12 poisons. This will only spread a single poison. So if you're building around stacking many poisons, it's only spreading one of them. It'll often, in practice, end up allowing you to kill, like white monsters, maybe some blue monsters, but it's not gonna, on average, early on, it's definitely not gonna be killing all, rares and uniques or anything from that spread. But it is nice for cleaning up the clear. That's one of the weaknesses of just doing, particularly an attack-based poison skill, and getting that pro left feels really, really good. And the thing is, if you're going into 4, 3 is already on the way, so you're taking it no matter what. Now, double the number of poisons you can inflict on enemies. I think you can get additional on the tree, so you can get, like +4, and then you're at 5. Doubles this, goes up to 10, but less poison duration. So, if you're trying to stack 10 poisons, you want to make sure to get your damage uptime, you have to ramp up all of those poisons. And with the less poison duration, can be a little bit harder to do. So you need to increase that poison duration or attack more quickly to stack them faster. Now the concoctions. Let's do the other ones first, and then we'll talk about the concoctions. So Traveler's Wisdom right here, 5 passive skill points. Now, I think 6, 7, and 8 for at least 6 and 7. I think 8 is kind of how often are slows hitting you. You might not care about that. But I think 6 and 7, if you want to rush the campaign, if you want quality of life, this might actually be really good. I think taking a concoction, grabbing 5 additional passive skill points, and then being able to attack and go faster at the same time, this might be really good for rushing the campaign at least. How it feels in endgame, I don't know. In PoE 1, we actually already have Poisonous Concoction and Explosive Concoction. These already exist. So one of them is they use your flasks. Interesting, mana flasks for Poisonous Concoction. These are all mana flasks. This is different than PoE 1. In PoE 1, concoctions use life flasks. But there is one for each element. We get fire, lightning, and cold, as well as a bleeding flask. It consumes your mana flask. I can't tell from these, but in PoE 1, the stronger flask, the better rolled it is, the more that it recovers, the stronger the damage that it adds to these concoctions. So they are also unarmed skills, so you do not equip a weapon. You can have a shield, but no weapon, and your weapon is these flasks. You're going to throw them. It's kind of weird. Like if you take a poisonous concoction, you are also going to want to take 3 and 4, almost definitely. So now you're stuck with only being able to take 1 node, and you're most likely going to take 50% more flask charges gain, right? Because you don't want to run out of flasks when you're throwing. So it's kind of weird. If you're going you actually can't even look at any of these nodes if you're playing a poison Pathfinder, I think. There's a world where maybe you're not building 3 and 4, but I think Pathfinder is kind of awkward. I think there's some very powerful stuff. For all I know, she could end up being, just like in PoE 1, conditionally the strongest Ascendancy. Pathfinder was at times, many, many times, the strongest Ascendancy in the game, and she could absolutely be it in PoE 2. But looking at her, she's kind of weird. I don't know how I feel about her. Very inspired by PoE 1 Pathfinder, but I'm putting her at a 5 out of 10. 6, 7, and 8 are kind of really awkward. They're just quality of life. They don't give you damage or defense. 5 passive points is really nice, but I'm going to put her at a low B tier. Is 5 out of 10 a low B tier maybe? Or is that even a C tier? Might be high C tier. I feel really weird about her. Gonna put her high C tier. If Chronomancer is F, I'm gonna put her high C. All right, next up, Blood Mage. Also, I think she's intermediate. I think that's where I put her. I don't think she's super beginner friendly. Okay, Blood Mage. We're gonna try to speed up. Oh man, cool. It's been almost an hour. This is great. Nice quick video, guys. Blood Mage. A lot of people are already talking about the Blood Mage. I think it is probably just going to be really strong. He has Grasping of Wounds. He has exactly what I want on the Chronomancer. I think this fits Chronomancer so much better. I think Recoup, in my mind, fits Blood Mage better because he's already built around recovery and all that. But instead, they gave it to the Blood Mage and what I want on the Chronomancer. If you know Path of Exile 1, you know that Progenesis, you know that Petrified Blood are 2 of the strongest defensive things that you could do, particularly stacking them in PoE 1. And Grasping Wounds right here is just straight up that. So instead of taking the damage straight up, 25% of that is prevented, and you will take that slowly over the next 4 seconds. That will give your time to recover that life. He has a built-in life recovery mechanic. So what he does by default, you're forced to take Sanguimancy. So no matter what, your skills by default would cost both mana and life of the same amount. So, this costs 50 mana, costs 50 life to cast it. However, when you kill or critically hit a target, it will spawn a life remnant, which will grant you life, and it can also overflow your maximal life. I don't know what the max number of that overflow is, but you can end up with even more than your maximum life. So, for example, You can kill a bunch of monsters, overflow your life. Let's say you get 50% more than your max life, maybe even double your max life. I don't know what the cap is there. And then you walk into the boss room and you're just big Chungus boy with way more than your default life. Or you're spending your life to cast your spells, but still, that's, I think, really, really powerful. So you're forced to take that no matter what on this character. You're starting up here, you're taking 1. Next up, Vitality Siphon, 10% of spell damage, leeches life. Probably good. Leech is very weird in PoE 1, but I do think it's probably just a nice quality life to get. I think while you're mapping, this just might feel really good. Or sorry, when you're just starting off, like this might be the second node that you take. Just, hey, I just want more life. I want to leech. Feels really good. Next up, Curses at Infinite Duration. I don't know what the applications are for this in PoE 2. In PoE 1, I would never, ever take this. There's like some limited applications where infinite curses are like cute because there's things around curse duration. But 99% of the time, I would just not waste an Ascendancy point to not have to worry about casting a curse. In PoE 1, you can apply a curse and it'll last easily 15, 20, especially if you have temporal chains. You can make curses last 15, 20 seconds. And I don't mind recursing after 15, 20 seconds. So to me, his other stuff is just so much stronger. Next up, Blood Barbs. 10% of damage is extra fizz. You know, if you're doing physical damage, you care about that, 10% more damage. And then elemental damage also contributes to bleeding. So if you're building around bleed, then you can use whatever skills you want. You can bleed them with the fireball. By default, bleed only works with physical damage, but this way you can bleed with anything. So I think that's just kind of fun. I don't know how good bleed's going to be going into PoE 2, but and then our nice damage scaling right here, 1% increased critical damage bonus per 40 life. That's just really nice. That's our crit multi. That's just how big your critical strikes are. And if you're stacking life on this guy, because he's all built around life and bleeding, or sorry, she. I'm just thinking, I keep thinking of Vlad. Like, this looks so much like Vlad from League of Legends. I just think it's a he. But yeah, this is the witch. Sorry, I should have said this is the witch Ascendancy. Yeah, building around crits, stacking life. Now, next up, Sunder the Flesh. Base critical hit chance for spells is 15%. Now, we've seen a lot of skills having over 10% base critical hit already. So based on the spell that you're playing, you may or may not take this. If you're using a spell that has low critical hit chance and you just want to crit with it, you may take this. But his other stuff is so good. Her other stuff is so good that I think there's a good chance that you're going to gravitate towards high base crit and not take Sunder the Flesh. But we'll see how that plays out. I think it's a really good node conditionally. Grasping Wounds, like I said, godlike node. Frustrating it's not on the Chronomancer, but godlike node. And then next up, gain energy shields from equipped body armor as extra maximum life. Very similar, like I said earlier, the strongest character in Path of Exile 1 right now is the Trickster. And the reason why he's so strong is this node right here. Gain evasion for energy shield, gain energy shield for evasion. Things that allow you to stack something that's already defensive and make another defensive stat even higher is really, really good in PoE. Grain of salt, PoE 1, brain, always. But if you can stack one defense and that also makes another defense go up, that's just good. And that's what we're doing here. Your energy shield from your equipped body armor. This allows you to make a body armor that you get as much life on as possible, but you also roll for high ES. And then that'll also give you even more maximum life. In PoE 1, at least, you can get body armors that have over 1,000 energy shield. I don't know what the values are in PoE 2, but an additional 1,000 flat life added to your character, insane. Particularly if we're overflowing by a percent of life. If we're gaining crit per life, the synergies here are incredible. I am putting Blood Mage on S tier. I don't think I put it as S tier last night, but I'm going to put it S tier right now. I think the synergies, I'm just convinced myself to do that. I had him at 8 out of 10. I'm going to leave him 8 out of 10. I think that's fine. And I think that's bottom of S tier. Absolutely amazing. I think he's intermediate because I think actually playing him is going to be fine, however you build him. But her, it looks so much like Vlad. I think playing her is going to be pretty straightforward, but I think there will be a lot of subtlety towards building her properly. Go with that in mind. I think it's more of an intermediate character, not as straightforward as Titan, but still very, very good and shouldn't turn you off from giving it a shot. Okay, we're more than halfway done. All right, next up, Infernalist. Infernalist, where did I put it? We're just going to spoil it right now. I put it at 6 out of 10, intermediate. I think Infernalist is good, but a little wonky. This is something that was really strong in PoE 1, taking a damage type as another damage type. What this allows you to do is kind of ignore having to mitigate that damage type as much. So what we can do is you're intended to stack fire and additionally, probably chaos resistance. Your max res caps at 75 by default in Path of Exile. and stack your fire res. So I think you're intended to stack your fire res as high as possible, potentially getting up to 90 like in Path of Exile 1. This will take 20% of that cold damage that you're only mitigating by 75% and instead mitigate that by 90%. So you take significantly less cold and lightning damage. In addition, making 25% of physical damage be against your chaos res, if you have 75 chaos res, that is just a flat 15% less physical damage taken, which is incredibly powerful because, like if we were talking about armor earlier, this allows you to stack less armor and still get the same mitigation for that size of hit. Any flat physical damage, particularly physical damage mitigation, this allows your armor to be much, much stronger because it'll go, that flat damage mitigation will happen first, and then it'll go against your armor, assuming it works the same as PoE 1. So this is a leading node going to 2, 3, and 4 right here that are very interesting. I don't know how good these are because I don't know the values and I don't know the power of a lot of this. What you get here is all 3 of these will reserve 25% of your life. You know, pick 1, 2. You can pick all 4. You're crazy. Reserve 75% of your life. There might be a world where you do that. Reserve a percent of your life. And then this allows you to get mana per life. This allows you to get energy shield per life, as well as spirit per life. And this is your life before you reserve it. So the idea here is you can stack mana, energy shield, and spirit while you're stacking as much life as possible. This is very interesting. And there's maybe a world where you do all 3, maybe even just 2 of them. There's a world where you take 1 or 2 of these and you have like a really strong defensive setup. Or maybe a lot of auras are very strong. You stack a ton of life. And then with all that spirit, you can be even tankier, do way more damage by just stacking additional auras. We don't know how strong, more auras with spirit is right now. Next up, we have this demon form right here. So demon form turns you into a demon. Apparently it's like bugged / this is why I have it at 6 out of 10. Right now, when you turn into demon form, it gives you, I had the picture, I don't have it right now. It's like +4 to all level of skills. I don't know if it was like cast speed, stuff like that. It will make you do more damage. You will be stronger. However, right now, apparently it's a bug or they're working on it and they want to change it. Your weapon will be disabled when you turn into demon form. And if you know PoE 1, your weapon is like where most of your damage comes from very, very often. For example, in PoE 1, you can have a staff that gives you +5 to your skill gems. You can get, +2 and +3. That's stronger than +4, and there's no downsides. I don't know how good this is actually going to be in practice until they change it. It will also give you a stacking damage buff. So the longer it goes on, you'll take additional damage and you will do more damage the longer it goes on. However, Demon Flame right here, so it's uncapped by default. You have a debuff that is called Demon Flame that is stacking. You can cap this by taking number 6. So this is Demon Form, and then number 6 will cap it at 10 Demon Flame, and then you're going to be taking, at 10 stacks, you'll take 10% of life per second. So if you can mitigate that, you'll have that 10 Demon Flame all the time, as long as you can regen or recover somehow 10% of life per second, you can have infinite Demon Form. So there's a world where you could just not have a weapon. You just don't care about even having a weapon. You could make a cheaper build, I guess, and just build around your demon form as long as you can sustain that. So kind of interesting, I guess, but we'll see how that actually plays out while the weapon is still disabled. That feels weird to me. Next up is Pyromantic Pact. So this one's pretty interesting as well. So this changes your mana into Infernal Flame. So actually you start at 0 Infernal Flame instead of at 100 mana, at 100% mana. And as you spend your skills, you will gain Infernal Flame. And when you reach max Eternal Flame, you'll take a big chunk of damage of all of your max life and energy shield as fire damage. So you can mitigate that. If you have 90 fire res, you will just take 10% of your life and energy shield. So this is something that you can deal with, you can mitigate. This allows you to not care about mana anymore. The downside is if you have anything built around mana, if you care about mana, then you can't really play around it. Like something like Mind Over Matter just won't work because you don't have mana. You can't use that with Pyromantic Pact. However, if you take 8 or 9 right here, so you take 7 for that, and then either 8 or 9, or both, I guess, if you want to, well, not on low Infernal Flame. So low in PoE 2 is back to 35%. In PoE 1, it used to be 35. They made it 50. But it's 35% in PoE 2. All damage from you and your allies, so if you're playing minions or you're in a party, contributes to both Ignite, Chance, and Magnitude. This allows you to Ignite with cold damage. This is a thing you can do in PoE, is Ignite with cold damage, as well as have bigger ignites. I don't know how much that actually scales. So as long as you sustain over 35% Infernal Flame, this might be like a weird balancing act. You can be igniting a lot, as well as your minions as well. While on high Infernal Flame, I don't know if not on low and high, like is high Is high 65%? High might be 65%. That's a thing that I don't think there's a concept of high in Path of Exile 1. But I'm guessing it's the invert, so I'm guessing that's above 65%. You and your allies gain 20% of fire damage. So as long as you're over 35%, you can get Bringer of Flame. Then over 65%, you have both Bringer of Flame and Seething Body. You'll gain 20% of all damage as extra fire damage. This is a thing that I don't think we have in PoE 1. I could be wrong, but there is no 20% of all damage as a damage type. It's only of a damage type to a damage type. So this is just generically more damage, period, which is pretty interesting. So you just get 20% more damage, period, with Seething Body. Now, the weird thing here is sustaining your Pyromantic Pact at the right level. It's really awkward. And then you lose 10% per second if none was gained in the past 2 seconds. So it's like you're looking at that Infernal Flame bar. You want to get it above 65%. That's my guess of what high means. Get it above 65%, and then you want to like cast, wait a couple seconds, let it fall down to 65%. Cast, let it fall down. How that feels in practice, I don't know. Might be potentially powerful. Big ignites and 20% more damage. Those are just good. And then you don't have to worry about mana at all. You don't have to take a single mana node on your tree, which is pretty cool. You have to worry about taking a big chunk of damage if you go too crazy. Now, next up, Loyal Hellhound. Just a little dude. Just a nice little good boy. Takes 20% of damage from hits before you. Like I said earlier with the totems, anything that takes damage before you, 20% less damage taken. Only from hits, but period. That just feels really, really good. That's just a great defensive layer. I think this is just a great Ascendancy. And apparently he ignites by default or something, does fire damage. Yeah, he ignites near him. So I think he's just a good little boy. So I think he's probably just good. Greening Immolation. Become ignited when you deal a critical hit, taking 15% of your life and energy shield as fire damage per second. So you can mitigate that. So it's only 1.5%. If you have 90 fire res, that's only 1.5% of your life and energy shield per second, which, if you have good sustain, that's not insane. That's if you are building around crit. Now, there is no crit chance or anything on this character. I think there's a world where you play around that. That's just, 30% more crit damage bonus. Just nice. So yeah, I put her at 6 out of 10. I think I put her high B tier. Infernalist is just really good. Could argue low A, something like that, but I think she's just great. And yeah, notes, Hellhound is a good little doggy. but only 1 out of 10 if you cannot pet him. So GGG, get on that. Witch Hunter. All right, you guys are ready for another S tier. Here we go. Oh God, we still got a bunch more. All right, we're trying to go faster. Witch Hunter, godlike. 20 passive skill points become weapon set skill bonus. So in PoE 2, weapon set points are between your weapon swaps. So you can say, hey, this is my crossbow. I took all the crossbow notes. And then with those weapon set skill points, on my weapon swap, maybe I have a staff. And those 20 points are now on staff nodes. So you can choose what you're doing. Or like, hey, this is my cold crossbow, cold nodes, and this is my fire crossbow, and then I weapon swap. You can just bind it to, hey, this is my cold skill, this is my fire skill, and it'll auto swap when you use that skill. I think there is a lot of potential for this to be very, very good. I think it'll take a little bit of brains to build it properly and efficiently, but I do think that building around weapon swap is going to be, and like really smart use of support gems, that's going to be where really good builds are defined. That's where we're going to see the real Giga Brains come up with really good builds. So I think Weapon Master is good, but I think by default, a lot of people aren't and probably shouldn't take it right off the bat. You don't get additional 20 points by taking this. That would be ridiculous. But 20 of your passive skill points become swappable. It's not 20 more points. It's 20 points that you already have. You can now make them swappable. That's what that means. Next up, 2 and 3, Culling Strike. Enemies that have low life, you one-shot them. Decimating Strike. Enemies on full life take a random amount of damage from 5 and 30%. This even works, I believe, on bosses. Now, random between 5 and 30 kind of feels bad. Like, do you want to fish on a boss for that 30%? Sometimes. Even 5% less life on a boss, period, and then 5% less life at the end. 10% less life on all bosses. Worst roll possible. And if we put this in the middle, right, what is that, like 17%? All bosses by default have 22% roughly less life no matter what. Just really, really nice. And if you get really lucky, a boss could have 35% less life if you get a lucky roll on Decimating Strike. Can't say no to that. Witchbane. I don't know the math on this right now. I haven't done the math yet, but it's just good. They have this stat called concentration. When you hit them, you can break their concentration. They gain concentration if they haven't been hit, something like that. The amount that they have is based on their life. I haven't done the math, but what it means is you can deal up to 30% more damage based on their missing concentration. And my interpretation on the way that it's going to work is as you're fighting the enemy, The concentration is going to be going up and down. So let's average it to 15% more damage just on an enemy. However, but wait, there's more. Concentration also lowers their cooldown recovery rate. I don't know how many skills on average for notable monsters that you're going to be fighting will be using skills that have a cooldown. Like cooldown recovery rate does not matter for regular skills. A fireball does not have a cooldown. Not all skills have cooldowns, but if a monster has this gigantic slam or something, that may have a cooldown on it, and slowing down their cooldown to 50% less. So their 10-second cooldown, their big scary slam is a 20-second cooldown. That can be really good for notable fights. This concentration is working weirdly, based on how hard you're hitting them and all that. But just making enemies attack slower with cooldown-based skills is a nice little bonus. I don't know how good it actually is in practice. 6 and 7, Sorcery Ward. How good is Sorcery Ward? Passively manifests a protective barrier, which takes elemental damage from hits for you until depleted. Instantly recharges to its full value a short time after it stops taking damage or is fully depleted. However, 50% less armor and evasion rating. How good this is, I don't know. Also, Ceremonial Ablution, 50% increased effective sorcery ward, and it recovers 50% faster. I think if you take 6, you always take 7. How good it is, I don't know. And it's only elemental damage. Do we have conversion for physical to elemental damage? I don't know. My instinct from PoE1, I'm scared of physical damage. Are we getting physical damage mitigation in other ways? I don't know. The fact that we lose armor and evasion rating a lot, 50% less armor is a huge strike to that channel of physical damage mitigation. So how this plays out, I don't know. My instinct is I probably don't want to take it, at least initially. Maybe there's ways to make it really good. I don't know. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. Then the last one, which I think you just want to take. There's a problem is this node is just so compelling. 10% chance to explode enemies for 100% of their max life as physical damage, as well as chance is doubled. Hey, if you're fighting undead and demons, 20% chance. If there's exploding, you take it. At least in PoE1, that is one of the most desirable things you can get in the entire game. I put him 9 out of 10 and beginner friendly. I think he's very, very beginner friendly. Lots of generic damage. Little concerned about the defense mitigation on him, but his generic damage is so good. I think you can just have a good time with him no matter what. I'm putting him S tier for beginners. Absolutely. All right, next up, Gemling Legionnaire. I'm going to try to talk as little as possible about this guy. I rated him 7 out of 10 if you're dumb, 11 out of 10 if you're gigabrain, and the difficulty is Einstein tier. He is the equivalent of the Scion or Ascendant in Path of Exile 1. I think there is a lot of subtlety, nuance, and complexity for how you can build this guy. He's all built around having additional skills, stacking as many gems as possible, getting bonuses for those gems that you stack. He does have stat stacking, which is, I think, less good right now in PoE2 than 1, but we don't know everything that allows you to stack. Plus 1 level, plus 10 quality, that's whatever. I think stacking 4, 5, particularly 4 and 5, and then adding in 6 right here, but I think 4 and 5 together and being very, very clever about how you do this can lead to some very, very interesting builds. But I am putting him 7 out of 10 for the average player. I think he's going to be very difficult to put together initially without much more knowledge in the game. People convinced me to put him S tier. I'm going to put him A tier. I think you can have a good time with him. You just do something like kind of generic with him. I think, plus 10 quality and plus 1 level is probably just going to feel good. And then just taking number 6 here as well. So you have to take number 4 as well. Yeah, I think you could do 1, 2, 4, and 6 and probably have a pretty good time. But the generic just power that you get out of the other Ascendancies, I think will be a lot easier for people. That's all I'm going to say on that guy. All right, Invoker. As a Dota player, I was hoping for something a little bit different when I saw this guy. I do think he's really good. Lead Me Through Grace. Anything that stacks something that allows you to stack something else is really good. This also double stacks. So if you stack an Energy Shield Evasion base, this guy almost makes me think of Trickster a little bit. This guy might be the Trickster of PoE2, at least on release. So you can gain Spirit for both ES and Evasion on your body armor, but you can't gain Spirit from equipment. This third line, how much of a downside that is, I don't know. If you can get a ton of Spirit on equipment, this might not be as good as it looks, but might be really good. However, number 2 here, and Protect Me from Harm. What, everyone, class, let me know. What did I say is the scariest thing in Path of Exile? Physical damage. Evasion rating also grants physical damage reduction. Flat physical damage reduction. Let's do a little PoE1 math just to give a little bit of examples. So I took this League Starter POB that was not even really scaling evasion. I think these numbers might be different in PoE2 because this seems crazy strong. It seems crazy strong. In PoE1 with 6,300 evasion, which is very low. That's not like a ton of evasion at all. Like I could easily get more. This is like League Starter Not even trying to scale evasion, I have 42%. Now, the downside here is you do get 40% less evasion rating. So I will say 40% less evasion. That still gives me 28% evasion chance. Now, if the numbers in PoE 2 are the same as PoE 1, yeah, see, I typed it here in the box here. Let's go over there. Typed it in this box right here in the lower left corner. Fun little POB thing. I still have 28% evasion chance. If that is a 1-to-1 in Path of Exile 2, that is potentially one of the strongest nodes in the entire tree. If that's a 1-to-1, like I'm almost imagining that it has to be different. Like I could very, very easily have much more evasion. Like this is a witch that's not even scaling evasion at all. And I have 28% evasion or 28% physical damage mitigation, theoretically. In addition, also grants physical damage reduction. So you're also evading. If those numbers are the same, this is possibly the strongest defensive node in the entire thing. That's as much glazing as I'm going to do there. Meditate, you can stand still and channel to recharge your energy shield. You can channel it up to double. So if you have 3,000 ES, for example, you can channel it. I don't know how long it's going to take. Channel it up to 6,000 ES, and you just have double the EHP, basically, if ES is your only layer right there. You can just double your ES going into a combat. I think that is potentially, I don't know if there's a cooldown on it, if you can always charge it or whatever, but potentially very, 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 very good. Maybe annoying. I think might be before you go into a boss fight, between packs of monsters, you see a scary pack of monsters, you channel it up. Might be what you end up doing there. Now, I am the Blizzard, I am the Thunder. 10% of damage as cold, 10% is lightning. Create chill ground, create shock ground. I think just good. Chilling ground, shocking ground, just really nice. I don't know if this is going to end up being particularly godlike. I think they're just kind of like nice quality of life leading nodes. Might be stuff that you can build around the chilled and shock ground that is really strong. Next up, Unbound Avatar. This is a node that I just find kind of boring. We have it already in PoE 1, where as you do elemental damage, you gain stacks. When you reach max stacks, you press this button, and then for 10 seconds, you deal 40% more damage and do more ailments. Nice, like, win more button. You do have to take one of these leading nodes to get it, but it's a nice little win more button. Like, hey, when I need the damage, I press it. Hey, you know what could use that? Imagine if I had control over when I did damage instead of this weird, like, if we keep comparing back to the Chronomancer. All right, let's not look at the Chronomancer. Let's not. Why would I do this? Let's look at good Ascendancies. Okay. Number 7, meta skills gain 35% more energy. So meta skills are the triggers in Path of Exile 1 or Path of Exile 2. That is the trigger. So in PoE 1, we have these cast on nodes or do something on nodes or support gems. So we have cast on crit, our favorite one. In Path of Exile 1, as long as you crit, it will trigger. Period. In PoE 2, they actually have to build up energy through something like hitting or critting or whatever. When they build up enough energy, then they will trigger. And I think that's their way to kind of have another knob for them to balance to make sure that meta skills don't get out of control. In PoE 1, they got out of control, and that's why we had triple, quadruple, quintuple cocks. I think in PoE 2, they want it so you're not just triggering literally 50 skills per second. And I think they want to mitigate that by having this energy mechanic. But if you are building around meta skills, I think this is something you're going to lean towards. And then number 8, critical hits ignore non-negative enemy monster elemental resistances. This is a better version of Inevitable Judgment on the Inquisitor in PoE 1. Critical hits ignoring enemy monster elemental resistances is great, unless they have negative res. If they have negative res, ignoring it actually makes it go back to 0. So you actually deal less damage if the monster's res is reduced. I think really all you're going to gain out of this, the non-negative part, is now in party play. If you're playing with someone that lowers it below 0, you can gain that benefit. If you're just playing solo by yourself, you likely aren't going to be trying to lower it below 0 anyway, because you're ignoring it and you're building around crit. This gives us 9, scatter them to the winds, which will do a wild strike on melee critical hit. So Wild Strike is a skill in Path of Exile 1. People in chat were trying to tell me it's not Wild Strike, but it's Wild Strike. And we'll prove it right here with the power of words. So Wild Strike is just this melee skill that basically really sucks in PoE 1. It looks really cool, but just kind of sucks. And what it does is it will randomly, depending on the element chosen, there's ways you can influence it. It will create a fiery explosion, an arcing bolt of lightning, or an icy wave. Let's read this right here. Creates a fiery explosion, an arcing bolt of lightning, or an icy wave of projectiles. The chance is proportional to your strength, dex, or int. So if you have more strength, you do more fire. If you have more dex, you'll do more. You do more cold. More int, you do more lightning. And that will be based on how that's balanced. And it's going to be a random roll. So, if you have 1, 2, 3 of each, you have, you basically roll a D6. And if you roll 1 through 3, you'll get the first one, etc. How good this is, I don't know. If you're doing a melee elemental skill, it's an additional melee elemental skill that triggers. It's like a free additional hit. If you're building around that, could be kind of cool, but I don't know how good it actually is. His other nodes are so darn good that, like, if I'm playing Invoker, I'm picking 1 and 2 basically no matter what. And then I think there's a really good chance I'm taking 4 and 6, or 4 and 6 or 5 and 6. There's a world where I take 3 and 7, like 1, 2, 3, and 7. I just don't know when I would ever play this guy and not take 1 and 2. Like, 1 and 2, 8 and 9, 1 and 2, 3 and 7, 1 and 2, 4 and 5, or 4 and 6, something like that. I think that's just the way that you're going to be looking at this guy, because these seem so darn good to me. I put Invoker, I put him at 7 out of 10. I don't love Unbound Avatar. It's very good, but I think it's kind of boring. And we don't know how good Wild Strike is. I'm okay with 7 out of 10. I'm going to put him low A tier, I think. I think I'm okay with that. So Invoker right here. Now, you'll see, we have pretty good distribution here in terms of like how good these Ascendancies are. Okay. Oh my God, last one. We made it, guys. I've been talking for an hour and a half. Holy cow. We made it. All right. And we could talk even longer. There's so much going on here. And then last up right here, we're almost there, guys. Everyone's calling him the CHONK, the Chayula Monk, the CHONK. And he is really, really weird. We're going to just rapid fire this guy. I rated him 3 out of 10 with the difficulty rating of, ooh, shiny, a coin. So the way that he works is he has this skill called Into the Breach that you get with 5 right here. Flames will summon on the ground. You'll just see them. You can turn it off, I think, but by default, it's always on. You will see these flames randomly show up on the ground. Think of them kind of like the collectible baubles in Diablo 3. You kill the packs of monsters, you get the power-up baubles that will like heal you and make you deal more damage for a little bit. Basically like that. It's like basically the Diablo 3. I don't remember what they're called. I haven't played Diablo 3 in a long time. These will spawn, I believe, every 1.5, 1.5 seconds, people were saying. And we watched some footage of that during the presentation, and even during a boss fight, they would trigger. So they will randomly be red, blue, or purple. Red gives you life, and you have to take the second node if you want them to be really effective. They're twice as strong. So with Lucid Dreaming, you will get 14% life every time you pick a red one up, 14% mana for a blue one, or 14% additional damage for 14% damage as extra chaos when you pick up a purple one. And this stacks up to 10 times. I guess you could get unlucky and just not get a purple one for 5 seconds, which would feel bad. But it stacks up to 10 times as long as you don't get unlucky. That is 140% more damage, which is very good. I think that is easily, to me, his most compelling thing about him, because everything else kind of sucks. My instinct looking at him, everything else like kind of sucks. That is 5 and 6. That's easily the most interesting thing about him. Next up, instant mana leech, as well as mana leech recovering energy shield. How good is that? I don't know. How much are you stacking mana leech? Are there limits to if leech works like PoE 1, which we know it doesn't. I think they said they reworked it a little bit. Leech in PoE 1, you really need some additional layers to it to like kind of make it feel good, whether it's overflow or max recovery rate, stuff like that. I don't know how good leech is by default right now. How much do you care about mana leech? I don't know. Might be a good way to recover energy shield. We'll have to see. Chayula's gift, plus 10 to max chaos res, so 75 to 85 by default. And then chaos resistance is doubled. Be careful, my little nooblets. If you have negative chaos res, it will double that negative. What is negative 30 times 2? Negative 60. So do not take Chayula's gift if you have negative res. I think this is a nice quality of life node. But because he doesn't actually have any physical taken as chaos or anything like that, like Infernalist has physical taken as chaos, but this guy doesn't. How much do I care about 10 more chaos res when that's an opportunity cost versus my other stuff? I don't know. But actually considering how mid his other nodes are, I would probably just end up taking 3, 4, 5, 6. So 4, when you hit an enemy, this is actually basically the exact same node that we have on the Shadow and PoE 1. So when you hit an enemy, it will have a random chance of giving you a certain amount of damage. We added up these numbers, and it will average to be about 19% more damage of extra chaos. So that's nice. Just 19% more damage. Pretty good. Overly complicated worded. You will randomly roll things. So you will randomly high roll, and you'll randomly roll. So these are 3 independent rolls, so they can all roll at the same time. This basically is going to lead to you having very spiky damage. So you could get very, very, very lucky with, a 0.23 times 0.13 times 0.07. Multiply all this together. Hold on, let me do a little math. So 0.21%, 0.2093% of the time, you will deal 175% more damage. So that's pretty cool. Once in a while, you will have a gigantic chonky hit happen, but on average, you're just going to deal about 19% more damage. It's just like a whatever more damage node that is very, very spiky. Like I said earlier, the way that I prefer things is I would rather just have 15% or even 12% more damage all the time than an average of 19 with very spiky damage. I just would prefer something more consistent. And particularly the way that damage conversion works in PoE 2 that I have been told. In PoE 1, you can convert your damage a lot and it'll roll these every single time you convert damage, but you cannot do that in PoE 2 apparently, which actually makes this much weaker than it was in PoE 1. And then last up is the very weird stuff. So Embrace into Darkness, you have to take 7, and then you can take 8 and 9, or 8 or 9. Remove all your spirit, so you cannot reserve anything. That's already a gigantic downside. Base maximum darkness is 100. So you lose your spirit and you gain darkness. It has a base of 100, and then you gain darkness per level. So level 60, you will have 60 times 5, 300 plus 100, 400 darkness at level 60. Let's just use that as a baseline. 400 darkness for each life or energy shield lost to damage. Instead, reserve a darkness. So this does give you a buffer. It removes your spirit and instead has this darkness mechanic that will take the damage instead of your life. And then by default, the darkness reservation will last for 10 seconds. So after 10 seconds, that darkness will go away. You get that buffer back for the damage that you take. Remember, you lose all your spirit, no auras. Auras in PoE 1 were so strong, you would basically never, ever, 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 ever take this. Well, there's probably a world. I'm assuming that there's maybe a world where you can reserve 1 aura for free with some keystone or something. And, maybe this is okay, but my instinct is this is kind of bad. At level 100, this is 600. If we think about life values in Path of Exile 1, going from 4,000 life to 4,600 life, it's not bad. You like it, like it's good, but that's not going to be absolutely game-changing for losing your auras. Now, in addition, gain 1% of damage as extra chaos damage per 20 unreserved darkness. So if you have 400 at level 60, this is 20% more damage, which is like not that much, right? For 4 Ascendancy points, you get 20% more damage if you haven't been hit in the past 10 seconds. And that number goes down as you take hits. Yeah, just the way that this is balanced with my PoE 1 brain, this feels kind of weak. And then next up, Inner Silence. I don't think you would ever take Embrace of Darkness and not at least one of these. And that's already half your Ascendancy. Now, if you take all 3 of these, then you can't take both Waking Dream and Lucid Dreaming. I think this is so powerful. There's no world I'm playing the CHONK and not taking these 2. 50% reduced darkness reservation duration, so the 10 seconds goes down to 5 seconds. It just gives you a more comfortable buffer if you're playing more slowly. If you're spending 5 seconds between each pack, then you get that 400 to 600 buffer all the time, which is cool. I think that's not bad, but losing the spirit, only gaining potentially up to, 30% at level 100? I think that's 30%, right? At level 100, if you haven't been hit. And then you lose all of your damage bonus if you've been hit. If you take a big hit, that feels bad. I don't want to lose 30% damage when I get hit. I rated this guy 3 out of 10, shiny a coin. It's not the worst thing in the world. I'm not inspired to play him. I'll just say that. I think there's some cool stuff here, but I'm not inspired to play him. He seems a little all over the place. I think this thing's kind of cool. I think this is kind of weak. I think this is very awkward. Might be good, If auras are bad and 600 life actually ends up being really, really, 400 to 600 life is actually really strong and the game is slower, this could be good, but my instinct is it's not very good. Instant mana leech, chaos res, I don't care about this right now personally. So I'm putting him in kind of sadness tier. I am putting him down here in F tier. This is my final judgment right now. I'm putting him 3 out of 10. This is what I'm feeling about the Ascendancies. What I'm going to do, that I keep getting asked about it, clearly I'm not going to play Chronomancer. I'm not going to play the CHONK. I'm not going to play anyone that's in BC or F tier. I think all of the S and A tiers you cannot go wrong with. I think if you're a little clever or you're willing to put a little effort into your build, I think B tiers are very strong. I think C tier is fine. And I think F tier, you are subjecting yourself to potential jank, complexity, something kind of awkward. I think how guaranteed you are to have a good time going into the game blind. This is basically the way I'm rating it. If you pick any of the S tiers, you can just take the obvious nodes, pick things that are very obviously synergistic, hey, I'm the Witch Hunter and I took the generic damage nodes and I'm using whatever and I'm doing good damage. I think that just works. Gemling Legionnaire is harder to play, but I think he'll be okay. Thanks for watching, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate all of the support. Particularly stream has been incredible the past couple days. We are doing giveaways of PoE early access keys on stream. I have a bunch to give away today. So tune in today. I think I have like 5, 6, 7 keys to give away today on stream. We're going to be doing some initial build planning. Guys, it is tomorrow. It is 24 hours from now, from when I'm talking. It is really exciting. Get your snacks, get your food, get everything ready. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for joining. And we're going to have a great journey here with Path of Exile too. See y'all soon. Goodbye.